Not only is Bernard-Henri Lévy the author of 30 fascinating books, the first international bestseller was written when he was 25 years old. He is, as Vanity Fair said, a prophet provocateur who speaks uncomfortable truths. He has influenced the heads of state to act and the rest of us to think about humanitarian crises from Bosnia to Darfur, Kosovo to Kurdistan. He calls himself a committed intellectual. Born in 1948 in a shipping port in northwest Algeria, his family moved to Paris a few months after his birth, and he spent his childhood in Morocco and France. His father had gone from destitute rags to self-made riches in the timber industry, and BHL Bala, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but in France he's known as BHL, was educated at the finest schools in France. And having read an early copy of The Empire and the Five Kings, I can tell you his work is a crash course in religion, philosophy, and history. He weaves the threads of today's big issues with the roots of in antiquity into a beautiful polemic tapestry. But he is talking about us, here and now, and it is a very worthwhile book. The Guardian reviewed his recent one-man show against Brexit with this: "The flamboyance of his intellect is matched only by the unshakability of his self-confidence and the whiteness of his carefully unbuttoned shirts." Here tonight and on podcasts for everyone thereafter, the Free Library of Philadelphia gives you this Valentine's gift. Dr. Lévy, in conversation with Carlin Romano, who himself is charming, Critic-at-Large for the Chronicle of Higher Education, former literary critic of the Philadelphia Inquirer and author of The America the Philosophical, here to tug at our brains and pull at our hearts, let's welcome Mr. Romano and Monsieur Bernard-Henri Lévy.
It's the special Valentine's Day presentation. I heard, I don't know if this is true, that because it's Valentine's Day, everybody who gets a book, BHL is going to give a traditional Gallic kiss, right? On both, or is this fake news? Did you agree to this?
It is the first fake news of the evening.
First fake news. All right, but not the last. Okay. Anyway, just ask for your money back if he doesn't do it. You know. So this is a serious book, unlike my intro, and the book begins with the Kurds. I want to ask you about the Kurds. The opening is about our betrayal of the Kurds, not the first time the Kurds have been betrayed historically. But I was struck by this passage very early on when you say of the Kurds put their faith in democracy and law, in equality of women and men, even on the field of battle, in secularity, in the diversity of faith, and in the sacred obligation to protect Christians, Yazidis, Shiite Muslims, and Jews. Why are we not more supportive of the Kurds in the United States? They sound like great people. Could you tell us a little bit about the Kurds and why you feel so powerfully about them?
I can reply to the second question, not the first one. Why are you not more supportive? Honestly, for me, it's a mystery. A mystery of shame, a mystery of betrayal, but a mystery. Because I don't think America has ever had, in the last decades, more brave, more faithful, more friendly allies than the Kurds. Brave. I can bear testimony of that. I was with them shooting a movie in 2014 at the peak of the war against ISIS. They were fighting for us, for themselves and for us. They were our boots on the ground of Iraq and of Syria. They were making a barricade, a rampart of flesh and bones and blood and weapons in order to protect the West. So they are brave allies. They are faithful because they are more than faithful. They embrace our values. America has had a lot of, and the West in general, and France, a lot of allies in the recent past who were allies but not sharing the values. Allies by interest, allies because of a common enemy, allies because the enemy of my enemy can, all this sort of logic. In the case of the Kurds, it's an alliance based on the truest, the most true ground possible, which is a real share of creed and belief. The Kurds, and again, I made 2 movies about that. On the ground, I was on the battlefield, on some battlefields with them. I shared their daily life. I spoke with the women, the men, the children, the refugees, the fighters. And I can say that the famous American creed, they believe in it. The French creed, liberté, égalité, fraternité, they believe in it. And this, this is a thing we often hear in front of when we face radical Islam, and when righteously we don't want to make an amalgam. We don't want to, and we're right not to say that. We don't want to say that Islam is a bloc. We are aware and very attentive to the lines of dividing which exist inside Islam. And we search everywhere. We are in search of a real moderate, democratic, secular Islam. It exists everywhere by pieces, little groups, and so on. But if there is one area, one nearly country where it exists as a bloc, it is Kurdistan. This enlightened Islam, which we desperately search all over the world, we have it at reach, close to us. You have some generals, brave American generals. We have some brave French elite troops who, again, shared the bread with them. We know them well. They exist, and we betrayed them. And when the time came to return toward them the friendship they had for us, when the time came to reward them for their sacrifice and their friendship, the reward did not come. The reward was, and this is how the book starts, it's only the first pages. After that, I speak of the Roman Empire, I speak of Putin, I speak of Trump, I speak of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, I speak on the massive attack on truth, and so on. But the first pages, where I relate the moment when I thought that we were entering in a new order of the world, are devoted to the Kurds. And this moment was when these valiant and victorious Kurds against ISIS just asked the West and America one thing, one very simple thing. We want to be authorized to ask our people to vote, not to vote for a president, this we do, not to vote for an MP, this we do, no. We want to consult our people with this simple question: do you wish one day or not, one day, not tomorrow, an independent state acting as a force of stability in the Middle East? And then Erdogan, the great Democrat Erdogan, stood up and said, if you do a referendum, we crush you. Khamenei and Rouhani, other great Democrats of Iran, said, if you do that, we close your airspace. Bashar al-Assad, great Democrat too, said, if you dare to organize a referendum asking your own people if he wishes in a few decades a free state, we attack you. And then America, that's the story. America said, okay, if Bashar al-Assad is against, if Rouhani is against, if Turkey is against, if Putin is against, we will not go we will not be in the way. And this is the manner they were shamefully abandoned. So the book starts with that because this little story, because the Kurd, who cares? That's true, except me and maybe you. Who cares? Little people with no geopolitical importance, with a little oil but less than Iraq, so who cares? But for me, I saw in this betrayal, in this self-affirmation of Erdogan, Putin, Bashar al-Assad, Iran, I saw the sign of an earthquake, a slow motion earthquake going on. And it is this earthquake which I describe in the following 200 and maybe 50 pages.
So I want to stick with the Kurds for one moment. As you explain, this is the beginning of your larger geopolitical theory about the withdrawal, or as you call it in the subtitle, the abdication of the United States in regard to these 5 bad guys. But I want to stick with the Kurds for a moment to ask you something that I haven't heard you talk about, and I'm curious about. One, have we now lost the Kurds by betraying them? Can we somehow, Trump, one of the nicer things you say about him is that he's inconsistent. If Trump somehow switched, if we somehow back the Kurds in the future, can we win them back, or has that betrayal lost them? And just a related question, I've never heard you speak to this. What is Israel's relationship to the Kurds? I mean, we're so supportive of Israel. It seems that the Kurds share a lot of the historic entitlement to their own territory and to an independent state. Israel has very difficult politics. For many years, it played ball with Turkey, right, and didn't go after the genocide to keep good relations with Turkey. Is Israel supportive of the Kurds? What's the relationship there?
Israel is very supportive of the Kurds. And when this referendum I just told about happened, there was not 10 states supporting the referendum. There was not 5 states supporting the referendum. There was not 3. There was one country in the world supporting the referendum and saying, come on, it is fair that the Kurds ask the people this question. This country was Israel, the only one. And it is true to the extent there is a story, because the book is a very serious one, book of philosophy, book of geopolitics, but also with some parts of, with some narratives and some parts of things which I lived live, I dare say, autobiographical things. I tell one story in the book. When this referendum happened, when the Kurds decided, despite the no of the Americans, to consult their people, one chief of state of the West, a European chief of state, I don't say who in the book, but you can guess easily. I called him. It happened that I know him a little. I called him. I was in Erbil. I was with the Kurds. I was on the ground with the Kurds. And I understood that something terrible was going to happen. I understood that the Kurds will hold their referendum, that the Turks, the Iranians, the Syrians, the Russians were going to fall on their back, And I was feeling that this big earthquake was going to happen. So I called this friendly chief of state of Europe. And I begged, I was the prime minister of Kurdistan, surrounded by some of his commanders. The story is in the book. And I said to this chief of state, Mr. X or Mrs., I beg you, you have good relationship with Erdogan, please try to call him. Try to convince him that this referendum will not be followed by an unilateral demand of independence, that it will not break the so-called Iraq. Try to convince him that it is a consultative referendum. Okay, my interlocutor over the phone tells me, I call you back in 1 hour. He called me back half an hour after and told me, mission accomplished, you are right to advise me. I called Erdogan, I told him, it's just a referendum, who cares, and so on. And Erdogan promised me, he says, to gesticulate a little when the referendum will happen, but that it will not go beyond gesticulation. Okay. I said that to the Prime Minister of Kurdistan, to his commanders, everybody goes to sleep. We drink a good glass of wine because they are Muslim who drink wine and like life. Not normal people, they drink wine when they like. I don't, by the way. And we go to sleep. The day after, the same chief of government calls me. The day after, the result of the referendum are published. Massive yes, 90% of the people consulted say yes, we wish a state. My interlocutor of the day before receives a call from Erdogan at midnight, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. And Erdogan, absolutely furious, nearly epileptic on the phone, shouting, tells my friend, you cheated me, you are a liar, this was supposed to be just a referendum. No, it is a plot. And you know a plot by whom? A plot by Israel. What do you mean, says my friend? He was probably sleeping. I have the evidence of that. What evidence? There was 2 evidence for Erdogan that this referendum was a plot by Israel. The first evidence was that in the sea of Kurdish flags in the streets of Erbil, expressing joy, there was thousands of Kurdish flags and 1 flag of Israel. And the second proof for Erdogan that it was a Zionist plot was a photo, which I have. I can share it with Andy or with Carlin, and you can have it if you want. It is a great photo, which had been taken a few hours before. We are at midnight, the second day. So in between the 2 conversations of this European president and Erdogan, a photo is taken. There is the President Barzani sitting here. It is a lunch. There is a table. The lunch is finishing, and we are at the dessert. President Barzani has a big apple, an apple, in his hand, and is cutting the apple with a knife. At his left, he has my old friend on the photo, Bernard Kouchner, and at his right, he has myself, Bernard-Henri Lévy. This photo of President Barzani cutting an apple, surrounded by a Jewish, proud of his Jewry, philosopher, and a former minister who, by the way, is not Jew, but considered by everyone as Jew, was for Erdogan the proof that Israel was behind. And then, because of that, Erdogan, in opposition to the word he gave the day before, decided to close the border, to close the airspace, and to reduce the Kurdish people with the complicity of Putin and with the complicity of Iran to hunger, to famine, and so on and so on. So this to say that it is true that Israel supports the Kurds. It is true that there are some similarities in the destiny and even in the behavior of the two peoples. I was so struck many times, not when making this book, but before. When I made my film called Peshmerga, I was struck by the similarities with the IDF in the ethics of the Kurdish army, in their way to save as much as possible the civilian lives, in the will to save as much as possible the life of their militaries. There is something which made me think in an irresistible way of all the experience I have with IDF since 40 years, etc. So, look like Israel, supported by Israel, would be the Kurdish people, if they had a state, another democracy in the Middle East, another democracy, therefore another pole of stability, because opposite to what all the nuts say, the only condition of stability is not dictatorship, is democracy. The most stable factors in an area are democracies, never tyrannies. Tyranny is when they fall, it's chaos. And probably for that, this support of Israel is, in a way, the Kurds consider it as a blessing, often consider it as a blessing and a chance. But sometimes it happens, it crosses my mind that they could consider it also as a curse. But as they are good people, you ask me about America, are they lost? No, they are so good guys that we are not lost. If tomorrow Trump extended a brotherly hand with the right one, a brotherly hand, they would take it. They are not the sort of people who say, because we are betrayed, we are going to go in the arms of Putin or of Iran. We are not going to become terrorists. At least the Kurds of Iraq, because there is, like all big great democratic people, there is difference between them. The Kurds of Iraq have never chosen the path of terrorism.
Well, if Trump does extend his hand, I hope they check their watch and make sure the watch is still on their arm.
But I can tell you, I went 1 year ago to the White House. I can tell it. I never told it. It's not public. I did not see Trump, but I saw other influential people in the White House, maybe more influential than him, by the way.
Mike Pence spoke to you?
And
he actually spoke?
I pleaded the cause.
Oh, okay.
I pleaded the cause of the Kurds. All that I'm telling you tonight, in this beautiful library of Philadelphia, in this surrounding of knowledge and wisdom, I went to express it in the house of Mads, which has become the White House. I spent a long moment there to explain that. And I see the difference between a house of wisdom and the house of cards or of Mads.
Yeah.
They did not get the point.
No.
They just did not get the point.
Yeah.
I did what I could. I'm a man of goodwill.
Yeah. Well, I am not surprised that Erdogan thinks you are a combination of the Mossad and Shin Bet. If, he thinks anybody who opposes him is with Gulen in Pennsylvania. So, but I want to ask you this. So, as you point out, starting with the Kurds, you developed this view of America's retreat in the face of all of these bad actors. unlike so many European intellectuals, you think it's a good thing that the United States has stood up to evil in many places, historically, the Second World War, and so on. You know, you have been criticized by some for maybe asking too much aggressiveness of the United States, and people have asked, well, what should France do? What should Germany do? Should they also be jumping in there? So I want to ask you a question that maybe you haven't been asked in these media interviews. Right now, the one country that Trump has said repeatedly he might go into militarily is Venezuela. And many people think, oh, that would be a good thing, you know, save the people from Maduro. Others, this would be a repetition of U.S. aggressiveness over the years in other countries. What do you think the U.S. should do in Venezuela? Have you thought about that?
Of course I've thought. Of course.
I can never find anything he hasn't thought about. That's the problem. Okay, we'll go.
It's hard not to think.
Right.
It's headlines of
Okay. Right.
all our newspapers.
Okay.
So, yeah. No, in this case, Trump is right.
No.
Trump is right. And those who are cuckoos are those who say that it is a repetition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's a repetition of nothing. Because today, what do they mean? Repetition, I suppose, of Chile, of Allende,
Sort of
of
imperialistic action,
Pinochet,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Okay. Except that today, who is Pinochet in Venezuela? Who is Pinochet? Who is the dictator? Supported by the army, governing against his people. Pinochet, the name of Pinochet is Maduro. I'm sorry. So, of course, the dictatorship is on the side, the force, the reign of the force is on the side of Maduro, and the party of liberty is on the side of Guaido. So, in other words, it happens that sometimes the crazy man at midday can say it is full light, full sun. Okay, he's crazy, but it is true that it is full sun.
Yeah.
So it is true that in Venezuela, people starve. As I said to a little group of friends and donors of the Philadelphia Library, I read a statistic a few days ago saying that each Venezuelan woman and man average lost 11 kilos because of hunger in the last 2 years. Probably 3 million escaped the country, as in Syria. Syria is a little more. So Maduro is a mix of Castro and Pinochet, is a mix of a hero of Garcia Marquez, the Autumn of the Patriarch, and of Mario Vargas Llosa, these sort of brutal Latin American caudillos. No excuse for Maduro. And in this case, what I regret is that my country, which is Europe, European Union, was not quicker in following the signs given by America.
So, if I can ask you a kind of devil's advocate question, even though I sympathize very much with your view and think interventionism is appropriate in a lot of places in the world, but when they talk about this in Washington, I'm sure somebody says, well, if we go into Venezuela, will Putin go into Estonia? I mean, if we sort of declare, okay, sovereignty doesn't matter, even in these situations where for humanitarian reasons you would go in, the very bad actors that you have identified, Putin, China, will China go into Taiwan, will Putin go into Estonia? Do you worry about that?
What would be the humanitarian reason for the zombie state, which is Russia, to go in the prosperous state, which is Estonia?
Estonia.
No reason.
But isn't that why they are bad actors? That they wouldn't do it for humanitarian reasons. They would
but
do it for power reasons.
This is the reason why we should absolutely not fall into these lunatic ways of thinking and blackmail. There is an international law now, which is the duty to protect. It is inscribed in the international law of the United Nations. when a dictator mixes the right of a people to govern himself with the right of a dictator to shoot his own people, then there is for the international community a duty to intervene. It's very clear. It's not Estonia. It is not Taiwan. There is no, in Taiwan, there is no bloodbath. There is no carnage, nothing of this sort. So there is absolutely no reason, no excuse for taking over Taiwan. In the case of Venezuela, there is some, it's pleadable that the international community minds its own business when she takes care of Venezuela. And same for Darfur, and same for these sort of places. The fact that the Russians, who are blackmailers, retaliate to that, it's exactly what we should not accept. The problem today, about to finish with America. Yeah, I may be against saying that a lot of my fellow liberals in Europe, but it is a fact. Without the intervention of America, I would just not be born. Without this manner which America has sometimes to wake up and to defend the values of democracy against fascism. If America had not this tendency, I would just not exist. My family would have been exterminated in the Hitlerian camps. If not America, when Sarajevo was under the bombs, when Bosnia was under attack for 4 long years, when Europe, I don't want to quote countries, I'm outside of my country, I have to be polite, but when Europe blessed the butchers, the killers, which were the Serbs, it's America who decided after 4 long years that enough is enough, and that the law of massacre had to change. In Darfur, where you had a genocide going on at the beginning of the 2000s, there was no intervention. You had a State Secretary of America who made a move there, Colin Powell, Defense or I don't remember. He went there for a few hours. It was enough. You don't always need military means. Of course, the military action is the last of the last possibilities. You just need to stand with your own values, not to make compromise with them, to be faithful to those who are faithful to you, and to show it to the world. Colin Powell did some bad things, but this day he went in Darfur. He just said, I'm here. And the war, the low-intensity war continued, but not the genocide. This is America. This is the America which is admirable. The America that believes in its own creed. The America who has a real moxie. The America, the US who considers itself as a special country, a little exceptional. I like that. I like this idea of believing that a country made by migrants, based on the common creed in a constitutional law, has some duties. I like that. The world would be more a jungle left to the fascists of yesterday and of today without these sort of countries. And honestly, what I say in this book, all my life, I fought against colonialism, I fought against imperialism, and I fought against unfairness. okay, since I'm a kid, today, where is the imperialism? What are the imperialist powers of now? Iran is an imperialist country who tries to colonize, and who is colonizing Syria, Iraq, and would like to do the same with Lebanon. China is an imperialist country who is planning on long term. It's not a question of trade. Trump reacts to that by short-term war of tariffs. That's not the case. China has a long-term policy which cannot be named in another way than imperialist. Imperialism in Africa. Go, maybe you do. In Africa, you will see what imperialism means. America is absent. China is everywhere. And not only with good trade, but with bad guys. Putin, isn't that an imperialism? What he did in Chechnya, what he is doing in Ukraine, what he is doing in Syria, and so on. This is imperialism. Erdogan, who considers himself as the inheritor of the Ottoman Empire. This is the way he depicts himself, as the continuator of the Ottoman Empire. He built a new palace a few years ago in Ankara, who has as many reception rooms as the number of times in which the Ottoman Empire seemed to collapse and was reborn. He is imperialist. He has an imperialist will on all the surrounding country, on all the places of the world which were once upon a time colonies of Turkey. So these, Iran, Turkey, Russia, China, who is the last one, the fifth one?
You had Sunni Islam.
And MBS.
MBS.
Honestly, again, a great Democrat who, when he has a journalist of the Washington Post who write unpleasant things about him, he sends killers who cut him in 14 pieces. MBS, Saudi Arabia, is an imperialist country too, of another sort, not conquering, except even that, some territories, but sending emissaries all over the world to seed and spread jihadism. This is also an imperialism. So, honestly, I am a liberal. I never changed since my 20s. But I have to recognize that today, the anti-liberal powers, the imperialist powers, those who use the equivalent of the napalm of my youth used in Vietnam, they are the five kings. So from a liberal point of view, those are the ones who have to be fought. They are the ones who put in danger first their own people, and also my people and yours. They hate all that we are. We have some bad sides. This is not what they hate, the five. The Saudis, the Saudi Arabs, the Iranians, the Chinese, the Turks, and the Russians, not the people, the dictators. They hate the best of us, the best of our values, the way we behave generally with our wives and lady friends, the way we consider the other faith, and the way, this is what they hate. So, no compromise with that. The so-called empire is right when he resists the five kings who pretend to build an empire which would be 1,000 times worse than the so-called empire.
In case you're wondering, the BHL book tour will not include Riyadh, Moscow, Beijing.
Moscow, I am forbidden.
You could do.
I have the honor
Right.
to be among, I think there is a very short list. We are 10 or 12 who are banned from Russia. I am among the 10.
Okay. Well,
It's a badge of honor
you can always do a podcast, you know. So, but
given by Putin himself.
I want to get in one last question before we take it to the audience. So you are always our great messenger from France. I do want to ask you a question about France. We talked about it a bit at the dinner. I'd like your analysis of Macron compared to Sarkozy and Hollande. You have known the French presidents. Is Macron someone likely to sign on to this agenda if America became more confrontational with these evil kings? And if you can say something about the Yellow Jacket movement that we're reading so much about, and what do you think about that?
It's two different questions.
Two different questions.
Yeah. Some order, please, my dear
Okay.
Carlin Romano.
There's number one and then there's number two. I know you can do that.
Number one, my feeling is that President Macron is probably considering more seriously than President Trump the American creed. I think so. I think that President Macron believes that America has a responsibility toward the world that has to be used and expressed and implemented with in a cautious way, of course. But he believed that. He would certainly not be shocked in the Venezuela case. Macron was the first in Europe to say that this position was right. So I would be surprised if Macron disagreed, if tomorrow America had a real tough position in front of Putin, for example. Macron said when Putin came in France 1.5 years ago, he had very tough words in front of Putin. When President Trump saw Putin in Helsinki last July, he left Putin as a little baby who had been slapped on like this. It was embarrassing, the behavior of Trump when he stepped out. Macron spoke as you have to speak to a neo-fascist, rather weak country. He was right. About the Yellow Jacket, what do you want me to say? Europe is crossed now. There is a tide, like in America, the West. This is another topic of the book. What is populism? What is populism? There is a tide of populism which is like a storm, not a tide, a storm of populism which is crossing all the Western world. In America, it takes the face of Trump and the face of Bernie Sanders. For me, it's the same. The proof that it is the same is that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump govern together in Italy. In Italy, when you watch carefully, you have Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump sharing the affairs. They govern together. And another proof that they are the same, that they are twins, are the Yellow Jacket. The Yellow Jacket are, in France, Trump and Bernie Sanders, the two Souths, apparent Souths, or in one body. Half of the Yellow Jacket are Steve Bannon followers, okay? And the other half of the Yellow Jackets are Noam Chomsky followers. No, it is true. It is exactly the way. Not half, one third. And there is 1/3 probably, to be honest. 1/3 are decent people who think, and they are right, that they deserve better than a life of misery. But the two big thirds are Noam Chomsky-like and Steve Bannon-like. And you have, it's not an image, as you know probably, Steve Bannon, at the moment when we are speaking, is campaigning Europe, and France in particular, and Italy, to promote this idea of populism. So Yellow Jacket is one of the forms So sometimes they govern together, sometimes they oppose strongly, like in America. Sometimes they occupy the streets, not Wall Street, the streets, together. This is France. But it is the same genus, two faces, God, phenomenon. And of course, this is the book, this question of populism, which is a real phenomenon of our times. After fascism, after Stalinism, we have populism, third wave, and it is one of the topics, maybe the main one of the book.
One is, where is Europe going? If you want to take a guess. And secondly, where are we going?
What will the future be?
About America, one of the, I would not say the thesis, but one of the signals I try to make in the book is that we, all of us, and especially you Americans, are too obsessed by Trump. Trump is an epiphenomenon. The picture is so big. The dangers are so huge. The scenery is moving so fast that we should look at that and not as at the tweets of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he is like, there was one emperor of Roma, of the late Roma, called Romulus Augustule. And the historian of the late antiquity say that Romulus Augustule had an habit. He spent his days in the yard of his chickens, and during all day he tweeted. This is, and during that, the barbarian, there is a story in the book, the comparison between the two, Romulus Augustine and Trump. And during this time, in the meantime, the barbarians, the Erdogan, the Xi Jinping, the Putin of this time advanced. So please, let's not commit the same mistake of that as the contemporaries of Romulus Augustule. Where is going America? America will be there when Romulus Augustule will be out of office. I can tell you that. And a solid America, a consistent America, an America faithful to its principle. And I would even say that one of the merits, maybe a paradoxical merit in an Hegelian way of thinking of Trump, is probably to give a wake-up call to big parts of this of the public opinion in America. And maybe even, not even, especially in the Republican Party. A few months before he died, I had a conversation with a great Republican, a great decent man, a hero, John McCain. I knew him a little. We had a public debate organized by one of our common friends, Tina Brown, in New York or Washington, I don't remember now. It was called the Hero Summit. And we had another conversation. And he told me, but you know, what he thought about Trump and so on, and what he thought about the rock, which is America, and on which baby Trump would break his teeth. Okay? I'm so surprised to see, I'm here since 1 week to defend and to support and to promote this book. You cannot imagine how many admirers of John McCain I meet in the Republican family since 1 week. When John McCain was alive, there was only one. Today, there is no one because no one is like John McCain, but he has a lot of followers, a lot of people who begin to say that he was right. So America might go in the good direction. My only reserve would be, I told you, Yellow Jacket, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and so on. One risk which you have in America, there is one risk, which is serious, which is that as a sort of mirror effect, this stupid right which Trump embodies could create a stupid left. If you inherited of Trump a European left, I would say, obsessed by identity politics, obsessed by radicalism, and so on, gain at the cause of BDS, which is for me an anti-Semitic movement. And I explain in this book why. It is not just, I'm not a lunatic saying BDS is anti. I prove that BDS is an anti-Semitic campaign. This would be a tragedy. God makes that you don't go out of this stupid right by the door of a stupid left. It might be, but your upload signifies that in a great city like this one, was Philadelphia, such a seed for America, it will not be the case. So that is where America is going. I'm pretty sure that there will be an awakening of the best of America after this dark season which you are living. In Europe, probably same uncertainty. There is a risk of collapse. But not sure. When Brexit happened, everyone, me included, said this Brexit is the first sign of the débandade. Everyone like this, like birds. It proved not. Europe was made, in a sense, more solid. The institutions of Europe held firm after Brexit. Now we'll have a campaign, a European campaign. We'll see. We will have two lines, two political lines, a populist Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump mixed line. This is Salvini in Italy, Orban in Hungary, and you will have a decent and democratic or Republican, it is the same in France, line which is Macron. We'll see which one prevails. In any case, if we leave 1 minute the politics, because I'm not a politician and I don't care so much about it. I'm a philosopher, and I try to take all these problems from the bottom, from at the depth of it, at the roots. And the roots is philosophical. And for me, the real question is the metaphysical link between our two countries. The West will be saved, the democracy will prevail, the common interest will be the law if Europe and America keep the link of life, the link of light on which America was based a few centuries ago. And my theory in the book is that if America exists, it is because we had, in the 17th century, some enlightened and devoted Europeans who saw the old Europe in flames, flames of wars of religion, the flames of intolerance, the flames of arrogance, and they decided to take a ship and to reinvent Europe on a new coast. This is the story of America, a way to resume Europe at new cost, on a new ground, with a better achievement. And my theory in the book is that these founding fathers, the pilgrim fathers of the Mayflower, a thing which is not very well known in Europe, I'm not sure either if it is so well known here. They were readers of one book. There is one book which was not the coffee table, but the bed table book of the Pilgrim Fathers. It was a book of Virgil, the Latin poet Virgil, who wrote a great poem called Aeneid, the history of Aeneas, Aeneas, the man who escapes Troy in flames and who decides to build a new Troy on a new ground, which is the ground of Italy. The founding fathers of America were people who were convinced to be new Aeneas, founding a new Roma, because the old Roma was in flames as the city of Troy was in flames. And I discovered that in a very simple way. I looked one day at a bill of $1. This is the book. There is a whole chapter about that. A bill of $1. And I looked carefully. And I discovered, I don't know how many of you know that there is on a bill of $1 3 quotes in Latin of Virgil. You are the only country in the world on the banknotes of which there is 3 Latin quotes of Virgil. Completely crazy when you think of it. Then I began to dig the question. One is very well known, you know, it is E pluribus unum, but there is 2 others. 3 quotes of Virgil, Annuit coeptis, Novus ordo seculorum, and E pluribus unum. And when I digged, I discovered what I tell you. That all the inventors of America, probably till the Civil War, were obsessed by Virgil, were inhabited by the idea that they were doing the same gesture as the son of Priam, Aeneas, reinventing Troy because Troy was burning. So as long as America, this is my conviction, as long as America keeps the memory of this founding stone, which is resuming Europe, not Europe as itself, but the values of Europe, freedom, free spirit, a certain conception of love, of respect due to women, and so on. As long as America believes, and will believe that Europe may fail, but America will succeed in making bright the flame of the best of the West, America will be great. The problem is that you have sometimes the feeling that America is turning back to that and cutting the magic thread. This magic thread between Europe, that's why I said it because your 2 questions are connected. As long as the magic Virgilian thread, the thread of Virgil, will be on, will be not cut, we will be in good shape. You, Europeans, and us, Americans, or the reverse. You know? If the thread is broken, as Mr. Trump seems sometimes to wish, and as, alas, Barack Obama, the previous president, sometimes seemed also to be ready for. Barack Obama gave him also signs of his will, of the fact, of the idea that it was time for America to invent another destiny, to look more west, to Asia. But then when you look too much west, you look east, you know? This is the earth. Then you enter in an unknown territory. And as for myself and for this book, I am an ardent, vibrant militant of this metaphysical link of life between the values of Europe and the values of America.